Welcome, everybody. My name is Todd Fernandez, and with Climate Crisis Policy, and I'll be your host today. I usually have a written set of remarks for each one of these meetings since we record them for posterity. But today I don't have remarks, nor do I have even an outline of what I should say, because we are in full organizing mode with the symposium, which is a nonstop thing that's going extremely well, better than I ever dreamed, really. And we're going to talk more about that later today. But the response has been incredible, and the panels are very full, and it's a great lineup of organizations, and just the tip of an iceberg of the climate movement and beyond, obviously, but a really wonderful representative group, I think. So everything's in full swing there. Today, I thought it would be fun to hear your thoughts about the questions that we've posed. There's a central question, and then there are like five, a little bit more granular. And so I'll post them in the chat in just a second. And then after we have an opening presentation from Juan Perez Saez from the Wilderness Society, a new colleague who I just met from the U.S. Climate Action Network. And we had a great talk, and there's a lot of simpatico there. We both come from the LGBT community, and we're both in this climate movement. And he was just so inspirational in our chat the other day. I'm like, well, come tell everybody what you're working on with respect to public lands. And so he's going to do that. And then we're going to have some remarks from Rachel Matcliffe, who is hard at work as always on her latest pursuit. This one involves, oh shoot, I just read it, but something with respect to a state legislative bill that she's interested in. And it's a topic, though, that's of a national significance in terms of the policy involved there. So she'll tell us about that. And then we'll do a sort of an open mic a little bit around the questions. And I don't know if I can post the whole list of presenters, but you've gotten that hopefully in an email and you can look at it. And we'll just talk about what the questions are intended to elicit and the kind of conversation that we're having. So without further ado, I think we're going to welcome, and then we'll talk about the Adopted District Program again. We'll invite, at some point in this meeting, we'll invite Tara to give us a little update, and we'll answer some questions about that if people are setting up those kinds of meetings. Once we get through the symposium, obviously, it's going to be full court press on all of that, and hopefully we'll have more partners to work with. So with that opening, did we have, I saw Juan had entered the space, and do you have
I'm here.
All right, great. Greg, if you want to highlight or spotlight Juan, welcome Juan. It's so nice to meet you and to have learned of your great advocacy, and I can't wait to hear all about the Wilderness Society and your public lands coalition that you're building for a collective impact there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. And thank you for inviting me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, so I usually, when I share a little bit about the work that we do at the Wilderness Society, I truly enjoy sharing more about why I care about the work that I do. I think within the environmental movement, we spend a lot of time with data and facts, which I think is very important. However, I do think we all do this work and we care about the planet and we care about our communities for very different reasons, and they're all valid. And so in my case, I didn't grow up thinking that I was an environmentalist, I think. I'm originally from Panama, and I'm first generation American. But growing up, I come from a farming family, rancher slash butcher, which is kind of unique because when I share with my more environmentalist conservation friends, they're like, what, you guys were killing cows? And I'm like, yeah, well, yeah, it was a very sustainable way to do it. And I grew up clearly understanding the connection between food security, where the food came from, the land, the water. And so I find fascinating when people talk about farming life or rural life, and they're like, oh, farming is so cute and so majestic and beautiful. But if any of you probably have that in common with me, you know that when you go to the farm or to the land, you go to work. Uh, it's very hard and it's very tough. And sometimes you have a lot of rain, and sometimes you have a lot of um, uh, lack of rain. So you have to deal with droughts and many issues. So I think from an early age, I connected with the land and how that impacted our lives. And I have carried that out through the work that I do currently at the Wilderness Society. And so I'm going to spend probably 10 minutes. This is a very short presentation. I'll make sure I don't bore you. And if I do, let me know. I think the art of presentation is something between like sharing knowledge, but also being stand-up comedian, which I think is really funny. I don't think I'm that great at it, but we'll do my best. And so my work with the Wilderness Society, I'm the Energy and Climate Campaign Manager. And what does it mean is like, I help to lead the advocacy efforts to make sure that federally managed public lands and waters are part of the climate solution. That's in a nutshell what I do. And I will share with you, and I apologize if I'm sharing something that you already know. There might be a chance that you already know everything that I'm going to share today, but I hope that this can provoke some questions on you all, and there's at least one piece that you can take away. So public lands and waters are definitely, from our perspective, the right next step to act on climate. And I will explain you why. Before I go into that, just sharing what the Wilderness Society does. Our mission just got updated in this year. Our new mission is to unite people to protect America's wild places. And we have a vision of a future where people and wild nature flourish together, meeting the challenges of a rapidly changing planet. And I think if there's something that we have learned this year with COVID and all the changes and politics, is like the country that we have, the planet that we have can change in a second. So I think the vision that we have co-created makes a lot of sense. So talking about public lands, and I apologize if the map is too small. So just to make sure we're all the same level here, this is just a map of the United States and all of the federally managed public lands and water, or designated. And the designated, as I said in the top, to belong to the people. The fascinating thing is for people like me that I didn't work necessarily on public lands. I come from more like the just transition, clean energy, more like urban organizing and mobilizing. Was that every time that I thought, and especially living in Colorado, I'm based out of Denver metro area, you think of public lands and you think of pristine rivers and beautiful mountains and lovely deserts and Alaska and like the ocean, and like I think of nature, right? But the truth is, based on this map that you see right here, there's a lot of federally managed public lands that are not protected, that they could in fact be put up for lease. There are definitely some on the East Coast and the Appalachian region and Midwest, but the big chunk of them are in Alaska and the Western states. Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, California, you see that all here. And the majority of them are not protected. I believe Nevada, for example, has over 80% of their state land is federal public lands. And so those are all landscape that could be, if there is a potential for oil, fossil fuel extraction, be developed. The other challenge with that is like, they are all managed by different entities, and you all know this probably, but in order to influence the decision-making process, you cannot have to crack the code for every single one of these agencies or institutions. Or, you know, we have the rural land management, we have the National Forest, Fish and Wildlife, we have also National Park Service. And so for an organization like the Wilderness Society with over 85 years of history, we have people very knowledgeable who have been able to influence the decision-making process. But this decision-making process are inherently made in a way that they benefit the industry over people. That's the sad truth. And if you might question, are you sure, Juan, is that really happening? Well, data from 2017, which is probably the latest data, because after the Trump administration took over, there has been a lack of transparency. So the most accurate data that we have came out in the report in 2017. Out of the total US coal, 42% come from public lands. When I saw this number first time, I was like, what? Wait, really? Like, no, that's private land, right? There's a mistake. The data isn't right. And people are like, no, this is right. Majority is actually from public lands on, currently is Wyoming is the #1 state that produces some of that coal. 24% approximately of the crude oil come from federally managed public lands. And then we have 30% of the nation's natural gas. And the tiny little dot in the bottom shows that less than 5% of the nation's renewable or clean energy is produced on public lands. So definitely there is, a system, and there are processes that benefit industry that is killing the environment and making us sick. And if you wonder, well, what happened since 2017? Well, between 2017 and 2020, the federal government has continued to open more public lands for oil and gas leases. In fact, more than 461 million acres. And that's in a year where we all know that due to the pandemic, the demand of oil and gas worldwide has been decreasing. So then we have a bigger problem, and I'm not gonna go into revenue, but the bigger problem then is we have states that have historically been dependent on fossil fuel extraction, like New Mexico, or states like even Colorado or Wyoming. And so now some of those states have a high deficit, which means that people who live there are on the state budget is going to be hardly impacted. So maybe if they don't care about the environment or getting sick, maybe they will care about the economy and their pockets. So then when we talk about global scale, this is a graph that for me was also very shocked. If we were to put all of the US public lands emissions, so fossil fuel extraction, so coal, oil, and gas, into their own country, they will be the 5th country in the world on greenhouse gas emissions. And we all know that we currently are no part of the Paris Agreement. And if people are asking questions, I'm not looking at it, just want to be clear. Just let me know if anybody has a good question.
Yeah, don't worry about questions, Juan. We'll get to them later if we have time.
Awesome. And so I like to flip the script with this slide because I think it's kind of depressive, and you look at it and you're like, oh, this is so bad. But I think more than solution-based. If we think about the United Nations and the amount of work that goes into negotiating what is kind of like the world's government, it takes a lot of energy and time, not counting just all the emissions of flying thousands of people to one destination to negotiate something that then needs to be approved by their country. And that's very real, especially in the United States. But we have here in the US the possibility to have global scale impact when it comes to reducing global greenhouse gas emissions. Because in fact, like if we were to have a Secretary of Interior who gets it, they do have the authority to create significant changes on how we manage its landscapes. Sadly, that has not been the case in the past 4 years, but hopefully this is something that we could do. I mean, there are significant progress that we can do without even Congress. So that's something that we like to highlight as a possibility. If you wonder where you can learn more, I can share this with Todd after, and you can circle it around. There's the link, and I'm sorry this is a long link, but if any of you is really interested in maps and tools, we have created this like free access public lands and energy development map. It's really great. If you wonder why there's a lot of red on the west, is because this is technicality. Somehow the way how the Bureau of Land Management has created the database, they don't talk to each other. So the database from the East Coast doesn't talk to the database from the West Coast. I don't create the maps, but this is what the mapping team tells me. However, we were able to capture the majority of the leases. So everything you see in red are federally leased parcels, and everything you see on the circles on kind of golden brownish color, those are coal mines. And so if you will learn more, the quickest way to navigate is you can put your zip code on the top left side of this. Right here, you put your zip code or the name of the city, or your address, and this will zoom in and will give you a 50 miles radius from that location. And I will tell you where's the closest public lands, which is the fun part, so you can know where you can learn more about your state and what is around you. But also the not so fun part will tell you where the oil and gas parcels, especially oil and gas development parcels that have been leased already in your state. There's more data there that you probably need, but I just want to share some resources if you want to dig deep into that. That's more for us nerds. I truly enjoy going into this map. I spend too much time there. So next one. So what are some of the ideas? What are some of the potential solutions? So the Wilderness Society has put together what we call the Climate Plan for Public Lands. And it has is aspirational vision document that show like 4 areas how we can change our reality and make public lands and water part of the climate solution. One is the protect, connect, and restore public lands. Other people read that as like a lot of the 30 by 30 initiative that you might have heard, that there's some bills potentially being drafted, which protects 30% of US public lands and waters by 2030. That's definitely a key way to keep carbon storage in the forests. Net zero emissions coming from public lands. This is the Tito-less vision. However, I know there are groups out there who are fighting for net negative, which means public lands are actually taking more pollution from the air than what they are producing through the development of fossil fuel infrastructure. And our goal as organizations by 2030, that's what we're aiming for. However, the first ever bill that tackled this was introduced last December by Raul Grijalba, and their goal was 2040. And we did try to pull for 2030, but there was some back and forth there. And I hear you all talking about calling the people from your districts as something to note. Still, I think it's progress because at least there's a bill, there's a language out there that can be improved. Third area is promote clean energy. This is something a lot of time people ask, are you advocating for putting wind turbines everywhere? And the truth is we have this model called Smart from the Start approach, which the idea is to make sure that we utilize some of the brownfields or areas that have been already affected by oil and gas development that have potential for renewable energy, solar and wind. And we can create incentive so the industry can invest in those areas and support just transition. And strengthen climate resiliency for all people and communities. I think this is more important than any of the others. I think this needs to happen probably first because we are already dealing with the impacts and there are some really cool environmental justice policies out there. I don't think we should be the ones leading because even though I'm a person of color, like the Wilderness Society is predominantly a white-led organization. So there are some really cool organizations doing some great work that we are supporting. One of them is the US CAN. And that's all. I wanted to keep it short. If you want to learn more about the Wilderness Society, that's our website and our social media handle. That's my email as well. If you want to reach out, feel free. It might take me up to 2 days to get back to you, given the amount of emails that I get and my social media, but very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan. This is wonderful. I mean, those are astounding numbers, right? The percentage of this that's actually on public lands that's sourcing not only the dirty energy, but the pollution. And so, all right, well, that's a huge opportunity. How would, we're all about legislation here. You know, I told you already that we want, maybe I think we should add the 2030 bill to our package. So I don't know, maybe not today, but another time we'll come back and really zero in on that 2030 bill and what the elements are. But how would the 2030 bill impact the story you just told us?
Well, something interesting, and I think when you mean the 30 by 30 or you mean the net zero emission?
The 30 by 30.
Okay.
We've been hearing lately a lot about. Yeah.
Yes. So one of the things fascinating with public lands, and I think I shared this when I talked to you, Todd, was that especially on the Western state, public lands, it's less divisive issue, even than climate. And a lot of states like Colorado, you would get people who identify as Republican or more conservative also protecting public lands because they know the history of the state, and the region has very tight with when it comes to revenue, direct industry. And so there is, I think, a 30 by 30 bill is a potential bill that could pass, even with support from some Republican leaders. There is already several initiatives. So Representative Helen from New Mexico and Tom Udall, also from New Mexico, they both have been very vocal on supporting and leading the way on the 30 by 30 initiative. There is a similar version of the 30 by 30 that was introduced that is more like a water focus bill. And I'm trying to search that when I'm talking to you also. If I'm looking away, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just looking for my for my bills. But there's also like a water, especially trying to protect 30% of federal waters. And so I think one is achievable. I think there is more, it's more attractive. The challenge is the timeline. There isn't that much agreement on whether that is doable by 2030, or the leadership from the House might be more interested in making a timeline for 2040. But regardless, I think there is some really unique opportunities there. Also, we do have the investment of the passing of Land Water Conservation Fund on this year, which I thought, has support from both Republicans and Democrats. So I think there's some interesting tights there to be like, you voted for this, you say you care about this, so why don't you do this? Because we need to protect this for future generation. And maybe the frame of dealing with the extinction crisis and wildlife could be a better selling point to get some of those votes. I think that's what I think there's an opportunity there.
All right, so let me ask you this a clarifying question for my own. So this is a conservation bill, but isn't public land already in a conservation easement? And isn't that the whole point of public lands? And so what's different about the bill than what the lay of the land is now? And are there any conversations or legislation to address the existing leases and drilling and coal, et cetera?
Yes, you're hitting the nail on the head. So the Biden administration did promise, one of the promise was a moratorium on new fossil fuel development on public lands. From the legal standpoint, and this is the hard part that gets really hard, and I always get this question about like, is there any way that we can take back some of those leases? It's very, very, very hard. We do have like a whole legal team fighting. There is some campaigns even in Montana where we are trying to return some of those leases. And so the only way that we have being able to win, or I guess like succeed, is by creating protection on top of the landscape that have already been leased. So one example in Colorado, we're trying to fight for the Court Act, which is led by Michael Bennett, and I know Joe Negus has also been leading on that. So the Court Act is part of the Rocky Mountain region in Colorado, but they are actually oil, even coal leases in the part of the state. So the idea is like through creating protections on top of that area, you are able to stop future development. The challenge is that then we have the example of Bear Ears in Utah and the Arctic Refuge in Alaska. So even though you have created some protection, the current administration was able to roll back some of those protection and then make it so easier for the industry. So now they're interested in opening those places. So it is kind of like a very, I think there is definitely a combination. It's a kind of complex issue, but there's a combination between protection. There's a combination of literally just like bigger policies like 30 by 30 or a policy that address emissions. There's also ideas on increasing royalty rates. There's ideas of adding what we call carbon adders so the social cost of the industry should cover the social cost of their extraction. So there are definitely more than one way to move forward. And I think between now and inauguration, some of the work that we are doing with what you mentioned, Todd, with the collaborative, we have this group of organization, mainly in the Western states, coming together And we are putting together, we already have a framework, we're not public yet. We're putting together a short-term campaign to push the Biden administration, one, to fulfill their promise of a moratorium on oil and gas development on public lands. I'm still talking to some lawyers to figure it out if we can do public lands and water and which one is harder. I'm not a lawyer, so there's a lot of questions there. We have the precedent from Obama when he did place a moratorium on coal, but that cannot be for forever. Like we have to do something with it. And our ask is to create a pathway to net zero emissions that does not disproportionately impact frontline communities, underrepresented communities, communities that currently depends on the industry, but also communities of color that has been historically impacted the most. So,
Great.
So that's kind of like, I think that was a long answer.
No, it's good. It's good. There's nothing like a simple issue in the climate context. That much is clear. That's the clearest thing we have. Is so, all right. Well, at some point, I just offer up the idea when we're talking to the Center for, oh gosh, there's so many names, a lawyer group that is focused on all the lawsuits, basically suing the pollution industry for liability over their, the ramifications of their business model and practices. And I asked them, okay, so you're encountering all these legal stumbling blocks. What would you want to draft in legislation that would clear the way for a whole new paradigm legally? Create that liability. We've created circular liability, and we have liability statutes for past pollution. It's in the ground. We have models though that could be used for what's in the air. If you're having jurisdiction and standing problems and your cases are being thrown out of federal court, what would you want to fix in the law that would really get you to where you want to go? And so I just would say, when talking to your lawyers, and I'd be always happy to talk to lawyers about strategy, let's figure out, I mean, if the climate emergency is not a just cause for a public domain taking of those leases, I don't know what is. So I think you have some very solid grounds for nullification of those leases on public lands in the interest of, all the emergency. So I think, and we need to get some bills like that in the hopper on the table that are not necessarily that we think we can pass. I mean, the gay community, we've been filing bills our whole life that we never dreamed we would pass. You don't start with the bill you think you can pass. You start with the solution you want, and then you figure out if you can pass it. So I'm just put that out there. So I think I'm trying to encourage everybody to think bolder. What's your wish list? What if you could cancel all those leases? And why can't we put a bill to cancel those leases and then put it in the bill package, and we'll fight for it, and we'll see at the end of the day who wins that fight. But with millions of activists laying their lives on the line, the balance of power is going to shift from begging the administration for executive actions to them begging us to stop bothering them. That's how I see it. We got to flip this script.
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll talk about this more going forward. I'm so glad to meet you.
Thank you so much.
And your coalition that you're building around the public lands is another really exciting thing. You alluded to it. You'll talk about it more another time. It's this idea, maybe we're going to have a federation or co-op of coalitions that are working on various sectors, and they're getting tighter. The plastics one, the fracking one, different sectors are getting tight, and they're organizing in their demands. And then if we could link those together, we might really be sitting in a position of power and negotiations instead of begging and wishing. So things are moving in the right direction. And thank you so much for what you're doing. I'm very excited that we've met, and I love the Wilderness Society already. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And feel free to hang around because we're going to ask some questions, but I know you have a timeline. So next up, I'm going to go ahead and try to post. I don't know if this is going to work. The questions for the symposium. Every time I try to post anything a little bit large, they won't post all at once. So let me just try this. I'm going to put it in the chat. Thank you everyone for all your comments in the chat. No, it's not going to work. So it never works. Well, it's already down here. Let's do. There's the first three. And then there's a couple more, 4 and 5. And so you can just read these. We don't need to chat about them in the chat. Oh, there's another message in between here. Oh, I sent that privately, it looks like. Let me fix this to everyone in the meeting. All right, I'm gonna try again. So, but next up, while I'm doing this, we're gonna invite Rachel Matcliffe, who's one of our intrepid inspirations, I think is the way to put that. She keeps me going. Rachel Matcliffe, you know, we've had meetings every week in person for over 2 years now, since 2018, really. So here come the first 3, and here come the next 2. And Rachel Matcliffe would show up in the storm with her rain gear at meetings, and I would, at 80, can I disclose your age, Rachel? Over 80, I think. I think we've celebrated a couple 80th birthdays at this point. And she shows up in the rain, and she's always there. And just when you think you're too tired to keep going, or that this is too stressful, Rachel shows up and you're like, all right, I'm going to keep going because Rachel's going to keep going. We're all going to keep going. So with that, Rachel, I'll give you a couple minutes. We're not going to go deep into this topic, but please share your latest wisdom and passion.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me? I think so. Yeah. Okay. Well, I was puzzled by all of this enthusiasm over fancy green concrete. People were doing it. We've had concrete and cement for 2,000 years apparently, and people were now doing it so that the cement is better, so the concrete's better, so the place is better, and there's less emissions. And I said to myself, wait a minute, how do we find this stuff, and how do we standardize this stuff? You know, there are different processes, and some of this concrete helps greenhouse gas emissions a little bit, and some of it helps it a lot. And where do we find where's the standard? And I couldn't find any legislation. And all of a sudden, I asked Drawdown, can you help me? And they sent me to a man who sent me to a woman who looks into this stuff. She knows where you might get some standards. And lo and behold, there's actually an Assembly and a Senate bill before the New York State Legislature right now, which is not asking those questions at all, but she is, and she is affiliated with New School and NYU and a lot of very good industry folks. So my email's in the chat. The names of the bill, not the name, the numbers of the bill is in the chat. And Monica Barak and I will present on December 16th. If you can't wait, just email me and we'll start talking. I am absolutely thrilled out of my mind. You know, it's so wonderful. And what Todd says, coalitions are important, because if we did not have Drawdown in our coalition, I never would have known, and the whole thing would have gone, and a missed opportunity. Okay, that's it.
Rachel, thank you so much. Rachel brought in the Tisch Center to our early organizing. She connected us with the Center for Earth Ethics. She's always on the cutting edge of the hottest topic and the greatest relationships. And so I'm very grateful for everything, right? You're a constant inspiration to me, and I'm sure to many others on our team. So if any of y'all are whining out there and tired, you know, take note, take note. She never stops, and she finds the next right nuanced question to tackle. She was hot to trot on hydrofluorocarbons before anyone knew the word. So, and is a star of a play on hydrofluorocarbons too, which is a whole nother story for another day. Okay, so in the chat, we put all these questions, and we don't usually have open forums because they're unruly and who knows where they're going to go. And I know you're just seeing these questions, but we haven't really even talked about how to handle this because we are a big group, 56 people. So these questions have always gone out before. We really want to try to stay on point. So what I was going to do first is talk a little bit about the questions. I forgot about that. So let me do that real quick. The central question is, what is the climate legislative strategy and how is civil society organized to collectively achieve results? You know, that's a fairly straightforward question, I think. If you'd ask that of other movements, they would know what their bills are: the BREATHE Act, the DREAM Act, Comprehensive Immigration Reform, the Equality Act, you name it. There's a whole list. I get that this movement is much more complex, but nevertheless, it's a very central question when you're movement building. What is your legislative strategy? And to be able to articulate that and to share that with others who are not inside the inner circle. And that's really the crux of our push here, is that inside secrets are not going to save us. We need to come together, and we can't do that unless we start being more transparent about the strategy that exists, that has hitherto, I never thought I'd use that phrase in real life, hitherto not produced the change that we need. So it's worthy a topic of conversation to bring that out into the air and to discuss how it's working or not working. This, of course, is where it's going to get dicey. So then the next question, what is or should be the federal legislative strategy, both in terms of what needs to happen scientifically and what is anticipated in 2021? Can there be a gold standard comprehensive bill against which we can measure incremental progress? You can understand, I think, just by reading it, what that's designed to elicit. But part of it is strategic to get folks thinking of, can we do both of these things? So a lot of times people say, we can't have a comprehensive bill because we could never pass it. And we can't have this because we could never pass it. So there's a lot of political pragmatism that goes into defining goals and expectations that is somewhat self-defeating, because it assumes the current political reality. It's not based on building outside power. And so the people end up compromising with themselves. This has been true in lots of civil rights movements. And also people think that these are conflicting strategies. You know, filing the individual bills is, people are starting to get their minds around, obviously, because we know all about those. But then they're resisting this comprehensive bill idea, although some sections are not resisting and are pursuing that, I'm told. So, but if you have a comprehensive bill, then you can always have the individual bills, and at least you've set something in motion that can unleash the population, the grassroots, and all the thousands of smaller groups that are not inside these insider circles. And so when you do that, you create an outside pressure. You have to unleash that with that bill. You won't be able to control it and manage it, and it will disrupt relationships. You know, civil society has a lot of institutionalized relationships with the political parties, and that leads to a lot of compromise and unwillingness to push. The outside world could do that push and without worrying about those relationships so much, and it would create a huge amount of space for the inside negotiations to have that outside pressure. A lot of inside groups don't like this strategy or approach to strategy, hence why it's not happening a lot of times. And so this is the conversation. The next question is about assessing the projected impacts of proposed legislation in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And then how can we measure the efficacy in real time as solutions are passed and implemented? So I spoke with MIT yesterday. I couldn't be more excited about that conversation, because I've been talking to Project Drawdown and March for Science. I was like, it would be great if we had a special scientific advisory committee that could assess these projected impacts from proposed legislation and then monitor it afterwards. And, you know, they have created tools like En-ROADS and other tools for others to use, but I really want the scientists at that level to be the ones conducting the analysis using their own tools. And more importantly, this question is about trying to create a frame of reference for a conversation about policy, so that we can hopefully break free of the intricate conflicts within certain policy arenas, and at least come up with a macro frame of reference, so that when we are passing legislation, we are looking to that number. And we are agreeing that we, hopefully come on some big goal that we want to commit to, and that we can say, yes, the legislation we passed this year will do 20% of that, or 50%, or whatever. If we pass this legislation, it will do 50 or 100%, we think, the scientists think. And that, I told the MIT, I said, it's not only useful for helping collaboration among the insider organizations to have this scientific standard for our bills, our legislative strategy, but would also inspire uncommon valor among all of you, the grassroots, all of us. Because if you thought that this bill was going to do something serious and you got the MIT Project Drawdown seal of approval on those goals, just think what that would mean in terms of our willingness to make sacrifices to pass that legislation. I've been arrested 3 times. I know people, there have been huge sacrifices already that people have made for bills. It's just that it's nothing compared to what would happen if we had a major piece of climate legislation with clear scientific goals. That's question number 2. I'm really nervous that after I sent the questions, if these various folks are going to withdraw from the symposium. So we'll see if that happens. Then the next one is about how would you envision the most optimal process for collaboration between civil society and Congress on preparing legislation and then coordinating outside advocacy? You all saw the fight for the Obama healthcare bill, the Affordable Care Act. That was an inside-outside strategy if there ever was one, right? People on the streets and wheelchairs and Congress. But the question arises is who's drafting the bills in Congress and what is the relationship with civil society on this front? And all too often, the power dynamics come into play and they don't want to share their concepts or their strategy or how they're going to draft legislation. So this is to try to open up that conversation. Is there a process that is public and we can all participate in, and then we can see how the suggestions are accepted or not accepted, which is bringing transparency to what happens, because everybody had input into the Climate Crisis Select Committee. We submitted the whole digest in draft form, and it's reflected, I think, in the results. As you can see, the outline looks like ours. But that was Drawdown's outline, by the way, that's not ours. But they're being cagey, frankly, about coming forward to share the legislative strategy going forward. Because everybody thinks it's an internal, they got themselves inside the palace intrigue mindset that really they've convinced themselves that all that's very important, a secret. But I've never seen a secret bill pass anything. So why is the process for drafting the bill such a big secret? And why can't that be more inclusive and open? So the next question is, how do we unite civil society and environmental organizations specifically in united action and engagement to build outside pressure? What is the plan there and who should we look to for leadership? Now that's really obviously addressed to civil society and the environmental groups directly. There is something called the Green Group, I think. I got to get these names straight. So they work together behind the scenes. But what is their interface with the rest of civil society, the thousands of organizations and big, powerful players out there that could be, the 100-pound gorilla in this, if they were included and if they knew what the game plan was, if there was some transparency to that. Insider establishment and civil society groups do not like transparency when it comes to legislative strategy. So this is really the sticking point, I think, in the conversations that we're going to have in the symposium. We'll see what they say about this. And then the last question is sort of a catch-all, but setting aside executive action and control of the Senate, what is the plan to grow an unstoppable movement that can push forward the necessary legislative changes to stop pollution and save life on Earth? And this gets to what I was just saying with Yvonne about, what are the big goals that are actually going to save us? And saving us is a relative term at this point. It's really about reducing how bad it's going to get, frankly, which is a horrible concession to make. But I've had to accept it a little bit because it relieves some of the anxiety of the time pressure we're under. But we can't concede that, obviously. And everything we do, the faster we do it, will change the suffering of our children in the future. So what is the plan to build a macro movement And everyone wants to talk about executive action and the control of the Senate and pull out the politics, basically. And there's a lot of putting the politics before the planet, because that's just how people think in those arenas. It's not like anyone's a bad person. They're trying to be pragmatic. But can we break free of that self-imposed political pragmatism and think bigger and think about what kinds of unthinkable mandates and demands that we want to put in play, and what would that do to build a movement that would be unstoppable? People talk about mobilizing grassroots to force policy, progressive policy changes all the time. Bernie Sanders, that's his motto. You know, we're going to bring the millions to the Congress. It's harder said than done. But I think, and I believe on this issue, saving the planet, because I've met all of you and I see the breadth of this movement, that we will and do have potential power that will be unstoppable. So we just got to get others to help lead that journey. It can't be all of us leading from the bottom. We need leadership from the top. So those are the questions. I know it's a lot to think about, and I don't know if people have had a chance to think about it, but just for a little while here, let's take Stack. Put your name in the chat if you'd like to be in Stack, to give us 2 minutes, or 1 minute would be better, but 2 minutes if you know, and we'll gently try to cut you off if it goes on. And we're trying to stay as focused as we can. The hardest part in this movement and in organizing and getting people to come together is focusing our conversation and the discussion. It's going to be very challenging for me, and the 6 symposiums in a row over 2 days to manage these conversations. So I thought this could be a little bit of a trial run. Maybe I can also, but more importantly, I'm curious what would you ask those people that you've seen listed that are coming, the executive directors of so many organizations? What have you been dying to ask? And if you can squeeze that in, I just want to hear it and keep that in mind as we move forward. I'll be honest that this idea didn't come to me because we were so busy, and I was like, we didn't really schedule because several of the policy sector teams needed to do it later, which was fine. We ended up with this space, and I was like, well, let's use this space to hear from our community about this. And so that's it. Let's see how we have in Stack. I'll try to call on Stack. Okay. Now, if you're, yes, let's see. Great. Where does this Stack here? Did it start with Selden?
People can digitally raise their hands too.
All right, you can do that too if you'd rather. That's fine. Where do I see that under?
You'll see them in the participants list.
Oh, participants. So I have to come open that. Okay. So, but let's see. All right. So feel free to raise your hand too. We'll try to work with that. I see. Oh, Selden's looks like first. So go ahead, Selden. How are we going to do the unmiking, Greg?
Yeah, I unmuted myself. Thank you. First of all, I just want to congratulate you on all your hard work, Todd. This is amazing, and the convergence is so exciting, and your list of questions are right on point. The elephant in the room for me is, because your last question says, setting aside the Senate and executive action, to me, I would like the people in the convergence to address that. We may not, I'm fingers crossed, I'm working on Georgia myself, and everybody here probably is trying to help with Georgia in one way or another. But if we don't get the Georgia, the 2 people from Georgia in the Senate, it seems like we should be doing the maximum to pressure Biden on all the things he can do. I've been online and seeing discussion of what he can do, and some of it's fairly substantial, including declaring a climate emergency, which would give him all sorts of power. So I would like to see the leading groups at your convergence talk about things that maybe all of us should be doing to pressure Biden. So that's my only comment. Otherwise, I just think everything is very on point that you're doing and addressing.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to save my responses to after. So who else is next on Stack? Well, maybe I'll just say real quickly about Biden and that idea. We're focused on legislation. administrations come and go. That's like, I was thinking about this in the park the other day. It's like the difference between planting a tree and planting perennials. The administration are perennials. They can be reversed, with another flick of a pen. Some things won't be able to be, mind you. There could be major structural things put in place that will be very hard to reverse, but we saw they thought they did that before. I was on phone calls with the EPA right after we lost, and they said, we wired these regulations and they're so grounded in science and they're irreversible was what I was hearing. And nevertheless, things were reversed. So and we could spend the whole conference talking about the administrative plans, and everybody has them. Everybody's on that. All the groups are working on this. Everybody's talking to the administration. There are all sorts of position papers. There's the climate president, there's the Thrive agenda, there's all sorts of other documents that are drafted about executive action. We could have a whole symposium just on that and never get to talking about structural change, which is what legislation is about. So that's my caveat on that. And that's my fear, is that everyone will say, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do this, we're going to do this. They think they're going to try. And so I think I'll ask them all, say, we don't want to discuss the executive changes you have in mind today, but how can we plug into that work? And how can we learn what those are, and without going into detail? I see a thumbs up, so that might get us out of that. All right. Good. All right. These are important things to talk about. Let's see who else has their hand up. I see people saying, talking each other, but I can't see. Oh, Annie Wilson, are you next? Can somebody else look at Stack for me as well and help figure out who's going next?
Steve
Hello.
Miller.
Hi, this is Annie. Hello, Todd. Thanks for organizing all this and others. And the elephant in the room, I find, is nuclear power. And in looking at all the policies on the website and how many policies are to account for clean energy, to include nuclear power, new nuclear power, all over nuclear power, there's like 10, 15 of these items. And we needed to have nuclear power represented fairly in this up and coming conference. And it's not represented. And so the elephant in the room, because of the implications into the future, and because nuclear power is the most poisonous and long-term issue in the energy field, that it should absolutely have been included. And I've expressed that in an email that I sent out. And I truly feel that this organization must not exclude the discussion on nuclear power. Now, I do work with Northeast Megadem's resistance. Also, that is very important on the clean energy and the consideration or not for importations of large hydro, and there are issues there. Of course, that could and should have been, I believe, because we have an important policy and legislation tied to what we're working on. But in the light of the scope of the entire issue of energy policy and energy legislation, nuclear power is the big elephant in the room.
All right. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you.
So much for that. And I hear you very loud and clearly, obviously. We've gotten emails, and Catherine has been very pointed on this. Just a little bit of self-defense. We have a whole planning committee, and we asked widely who should we invite, and this didn't come up until just like this past week. So, and the panels are extremely full, and we've explicitly told all the panelists that we hope to not have a policy discussion. This is about legislative strategy, which has a whole subset of conversations, macro bill, individual bills, inside outside strategies, transparency, leadership, all of these things. And with 8 people on a panel for 2 hours, we'll be lucky if all of them get to speak twice, in addition to their 3 to 4 minutes intro. So I felt like, and I feel like this with our project too. First of all, we welcome the Megadam, Meg, who is like an inspiration of an activist. And I feel so terrible about not finding a way to weave that into it, but we've invited them to come and present here to our group and to have the policy, in-depth policy discussions like we do in this forum. And I'm just, we started out more gently here, before, and we're dealing with carbon pricing. We have a whole system for how to have that conversation. And the process for communication is as important to me as what we're talking about, so that we can try to wiggle our way out of the conflict that is sort of the status quo, and people are talking at each other and fighting over certain issues they care passionately about. And as a result, we're decentralized and uncoordinated. So they weren't excluded from the initial outlines for any reason. But now at the stage of it, it's so full, and bringing in pointed issue advocacy into this mix when we're trying to get them to think about what they have in common, how they can work together, and sort of not let them talk about the policy fights where their disagreements are, is the first opening salvo. It's like inviting everybody to the party to get to know each other a little bit, have these general conversations, and then figure out how we're going to be able to continue going forward, and what process there could be for having these conversations, which is way over our heads and our ability to control in terms of these parties. But within our own group, we will do this. I promise we will have sessions like this where we dive into nuclear, we dive into the mega dam situation, we dive into carbon pricing. So I'm not sure if that assuages things.
Todd, just as a last thing, with my frustration, it's all about legislation. And I know faith groups cannot side on legislation. So right there's a conflict in the definition of terms as you've described as criteria. So that said, religious organizations cannot vote or make decisions on legislation because it's against the 501c3 status. So that said, to base the criteria as legislation and not over policy, when in fact, nuclear, and of course in the Northeast Megadams, I believe you live in Brooklyn. By the way, I'm a co-founder of the Northeast Megadams Resistance. And if that's not available, I can speak, and vice versa. But the point is, the elephant in the room is nuclear power. And because of the long-term impacts of existing storage issues, of proposed modular nuclear, and the fact that this website for this organization has so many bills on nuclear should have been represented. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annie. I appreciate it. And I feel your passion, and I respect it, and I admire it.
Passion. I'm a rational human being. So let's leave it there. Thank you.
All right. Well, just with respect to faith group organizing, they have a lot of these groups have legislative lobbyists in DC. They're very involved in the legislative arena. And the real substantive ability that they bring to the table is congruence, congregations throughout the country, including in Republican districts. The United Church of Christ is not presenting, but they were joining our adopted district team, and they are already talking about how much strength they have in Republican Senate districts in the Northeast. So they are the people's army, if you will. I hate those military terms, but I'm not good at new ones yet. They are the people who could, in fact, pressure their elected officials and speak with the moral authority to save the planet. And they will be an invaluable asset in this debate going forward. And they can also help convene the warring factions, if you will. And because they come from a more neutral position, and they are not tied up in the same kinds of funding and internal politics, et cetera. So they serve a huge, they could be a potential savior for this planet and this movement. And I hope that they will
go to church, Todd. You know that in this day and age, there are less and less churchgoers. So, the constituency of church or religious organizations, faith organizations is important. I recognize that. But I'm not going to reiterate my points. And I understand you've raised this as a defense, but I do know that church organization charities, I would like to know how many actually are lobbying and allowed to have the charity status that allows them to do that. I'm certain it's a very, very small percentage.
Well, we've talked about these 501c3 lobbying potential, and it's quite substantial, actually. So we'll talk about that again in the future, and we'll go into that. But thank you. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm disappointing everyone.
Nuclear belonged at the table. Thank you.
So Todd, just to help get us back on track here, this is Beth Lissman. I'm on stack, but the one person before me is Steve Miller, who said, I have 1 or 2 minute data to share. So what I have is Steve, then myself, and then Tara, then Catherine.
Thank
And
you.
then,
Thank you. Okay, yes, please go ahead. Then thank you, Beth, for helping with the stack. And if you could continue doing that, that would be wonderful. And go ahead, whoever you said next.
Steve Miller.
Okay, I am next. I only have a minute or two. I wanted to comment on a presentation we just heard about open space and then extend it. What was not stated is that the 30 by 30 campaign that I'm familiar with by Sierra Club, if you look at the underlying research, if you were able to get 30% preserved by 2030, you'd be able to prevent or sequester 21% of our current greenhouse gas emissions going forward. And it was because of that 21% that made me think I should do something about that in my own community. And so I sponsored and pushed and got passed a 50% increase in our open space dedicated tax within my community, which is a big thing. It was on a 2-to-1 ratio, got it passed. But I was attracted by the 21%, which brings me to the thing we should do. Prioritize the core sources of emissions, work on those, and have that as a single focus. An example would be in New Jersey, we have an energy master plan. It starts off with saying, here's your carbon footprint, and here's the sectors and what we need to do for solutions for each of those sectors. So, but related to that is something that's difficult. And one of the questions you're asking is, how do you measure your results? And so I've done some work within my organization. We had somebody looking at how do you measure our energy plan as we move this toward 2030 and beyond. And the answer is something you can measure, some things the data is just not available right now. And so having data available has to be part of the solution. Otherwise, you won't know how you're doing. And that's my 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, Beth, who's next?
So I am. So thank you, Steve. And that need for disaggregated data is incredibly important. So thank you for bringing that up. My name's Beth Blissman. I currently serve as the United Nations representative for the Loreto community, a small faith-based community originally of Catholic sisters, but now made up of people of all different religious and spiritual traditions and some of none tradition. And I just wanted to raise, and Todd, I haven't yet been able to think about within your 5 questions how to weave this in, but I feel compelled to raise the fact that we need to have it be part of the conversation somehow for us to recognize that we are one country among 193 at the United Nations. Now, mind you, a very important country in that mix, but we're part of a larger mix. And so for all of us, anything we can do or say or ask to help promote multilateralism and the need not just for us to collaborate within the US, but for the US itself to be collaborating with other countries. Other countries are so far ahead of where we're at. And so maybe there will be a big conference coming up on the 12th of this month, because that is the anniversary of the Paris Climate Agreement. And so there was a talk this morning, I don't know if any of you caught it, at Columbia University, where the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who's from Portugal, spoke and laid out a pretty dire scenario, although called for US participation. So I just think that's very important to keep in the mix somehow. And I also wanted to note that people may or may not be aware that on July 7th, 2017, 123 of those countries voted to outlaw, totally eliminate nuclear weapons. Totally gone. And the 50th country ratified that as of October 24th of this year. So as of January 22nd, 2 days after Joe Biden takes office, nuclear weapons are illegal internationally. That's going to shake up a whole bunch of different things going on in terms of how nuclear waste, nuclear issues are handled. So just wanted to make sure people knew about that. Thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Beth, and for everything you're doing and bringing these voices forward. I appreciate it, as with everyone, of course. And Senator Kerry, you know, he very pointedly said the United States is 13% of the problem. Now, so that suggested to me that they're planning on tackling this internationally. But just a point on that 13%, that depends on how you count it, right? So it's like, if all the extraction and production overseas that is part of our consumer footprint is counted, maybe that number is different. I don't know the count on
We're
that.
at least half the problem. And then in stack, I have Tara, Catherine, and then Selden. No, not Selden, Rachel.
Thank you. Half sounds better.
Hi. So this is Tara, and I have I'm so excited about the possibility of bringing robust scientific accountability into looking at bills. I wonder if it's possible to have all bills that go through come to some sort of like, just like they have to do a financial accounting, if they all had to do a climate accounting, that would maybe move us forward. I also think that if anything is structured so that you have to count things before you start doing any action, that's a mistake, because we know that our housing has to be upgraded. We know that we know some like building block steps of what we absolutely have to do. So as much as counting is completely a needed cornerstone, so is action before you've started, before you've got your counting all in a row. And I also wanted to put in a plug for not doing anything that overturns state or local legislation that goes above and beyond whatever gets legislated federally. And I hate defining things by what we don't want in it, but I think that that's really important. And I also want us to come up with a catchy phrase for whatever we're doing, because it is so important to have people be able to identify things. I think the Thrive Agenda has a good phrase. The Green New Deal has a good phrase. Climate Jobs and Justice, which is New York Renew's in-state push, is a good, like, catchy tag. I honestly think that having a good tagline is going to be a key sales component. And for that matter, centering things on environmental justice kind of makes sense as far as being the right thing to do, but it also makes sense as far as making something resonate with a lot of different communities and a lot of different people, although it might anti-resonate with some communities too. So that's my bits. Thanks.
Thank you, Tara. And while you're here though, is there anything about adopted district that we need to share?
Just really quick, we're getting together a form. I know that before we weren't taking notes back from people that visited their Congress people, but we hope to be sending something out, I think, by the end of the week. It will keep evolving. We'll send out a different one when we have other bills that we're pushing, but we'll be sending out a form that we would like you to fill out after you visit your congressperson, just so that we can start having some idea of which bills are getting talked about the most, which bills have traction with the people that you're speaking with, and have some sense of who's been doing visits and where in the state. And so look for that in your inbox sometime by the end of the week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And to all the adopted district people, thank you all so much. And Brennan and Lavona have joined the team with Merrill. And so we're gearing up our capacity there and our flow. So we're on, better organized so that we can hopefully, grow. I just put in the chat the symposium registration. So if you've not yet, please register for the symposium. And obviously, please share that link as much as you can. I'll add the, while the next speaker speaks, I'll add the Facebook page, which is a little bit easier to share, and that will always have the latest updated information. So go ahead, who's next, Beth?
Catherine is next, and then after Catherine, Rachel.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi, thank you, everyone. The urgency of the climate crisis absolutely demands that we try to do what it is Todd and this whole effort is looking to achieve. As we all know, there's been a lot of good done over the last 2 decades, maybe more, but it's not fast enough, it's not complete enough. So the intent of having us organized to have a big climate voice to get the legislation through is essential. we all know, and all world leaders and physicists and scientists and you name it, say that the two biggest existential threats to the planet are climate and nuclear. And this is widely accepted. And speaking of slogans, as was just mentioned, carbon-free, nuclear-free for many years was the slogan. You go back 3 decades ago, it was carbon-free, nuclear-free, Beth remembers, and that got lost. So I think part of the problem, and Todd, I understand completely you're wanting to keep this copacetic and not get controversial. With many of these climate bills, you can say, oh, we'll do it by 2030. No, 2040. Okay, we'll compromise. We'll come to 2035. You know, there's wiggle room for compromise. With nuclear, it's black or white. It's either yes, we have nuclear, or no. There's no room for compromise, especially not with these modular reactors. So I think this is why it's difficult to bring a black, white, yes, no issue into a symposium where we're trying to keep things copacetic. So I appreciate that. Those of you with the Climate Reality Project and others, I'm sure, who have read Al Gore's book, Inconvenient Truth, know that he has said, wherever you see a nuclear power plant, there are nuclear weapons being made. So in light of the fact of what Beth just, thank you, Beth, related to us, we've finally hit that magic number to sign this treaty. We've been working on it for a while. So I really do think that the best of brains that are involved in this symposium, and I think there is a lot of brain power in this group, can find a way to bring this issue in without being controversial. Because one of my difficulties in going through all the digests, the Senate document, the House document, and the climate crisis, lack of definitions. What is the definition of clean energy? And before we write any legislation, we have to come into agreement. We need to come into agreement on this. If we're at the beginning stage of birthing climate legislation that will solve the problem, we can't be wishy-washy about including types of energy that are going to hurt people, that are going to hurt the planet, and that are going to hurt our efforts, because nuclear does give off carbon-14. Well, I'm not going to get into that. So all I want to say is, to wrap it up, I applaud you, Todd. This is an absolutely extraordinary and absolutely necessary effort. And so many people have coalesced around this. You have done an amazing job in a relatively short period of time, bringing high level, as you wanted it to be, a high level symposium. So I congratulate you on that. But I think that we have to somehow define terms and find a way to bring the nuclear issue, the nuclear issue, black-white issue, into the discussion in a way that will not cause controversy. And I think that's a big order. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And I'll just add, it's not just about controversy, it's about time.
Okay.
And like, as you can see from this discussion, we're not talking about the questions anymore. We're not talking about macro legislative strategy anymore. We're not holding these people's feet to the fire on the fact that there's no public facing campaign or coalition. And we're now all talking about nuclear. This is exactly what we cannot do at the symposium, or I will be devastated. So
let's see if Rachel and then William can bring us back on track. Rachel?
All right, I'm unmuted. Okay, great. So I would like to get back to Todd's original idea. I think MIT is a household word. And I think I like Todd's idea of having one bill where we can track success in a scientific, measured way. The bill has to have a way that we pay for the measurement, and we pay for the measurement with the detail we need to measure it. And I'm wondering if you couldn't have citizen science somehow brought in to the effort, because if you had citizen science, then the citizens who are being trained really would understand what needs to be measured and if it isn't being measured correctly. I think it's great. The only thing I would add is if we want to be visible, wouldn't it be great if we could find people who have platforms where the news are going to come? You know, like some of these senators, or this is their last year, this is their last hurrah, they have absolutely nothing to lose. Find people like that, willing to have public hearings and stuff like that. Why are you so troubled? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking of an old film called, I think, To Live. It was Japanese and people weren't born yet. But there was this great, great Japanese film about a man who was dying of stomach cancer in Japan, and he was a city planner. And because he was dying anyway, there was no way he could be threatened. And at the end of the whole darn thing, he builds a playground and the poor guy dies. And, you know, there's some truth to that. If you have absolutely nothing to lose, then you can stand up to anyone, because what can they do to you?
Hallelujah. In fact, just so people know, Rep. Nevin, I think it doesn't have an S, or I can't remember. He's likely going to attend. I spoke with his chief of staff last night.
Not Nigel Savage, yes?
Oh, no, Representative Congressman Nevin.
Oh my, okay.
Nevin, and then also we're have a hot lead with Congresswoman Tlaib, and we're still trying to get Senator Merkley. That team is intrepid and working on it. And if anyone else has connections in that state, please shout out now. Okay, who else is next?
Okay, so we have William Tucker and then Curtis Basinger.
Hi. For those who don't know me, I'm a retired.
Oh, William, we lost your audio.
Just been muted.
Oh, there it is. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm a retired U.S. CPA attorney, just so you'll know my background. And I've been interested in this for quite some time, since I read James Hansen's book in about 2009, and it scared the daylights out of me. Hansen, as you know, has been promoting carbon fee and dividend for the last decade. And I've looked into this, and it seems to me that Todd's absolutely right. We need to focus on reducing emissions, and we need to devise a strategy, a legislative strategy that can accomplish that where we can actually proceed towards zero net emissions by 2050 or earlier on a schedule that we can plan, and we can know that this is going to happen. And the best way that I see to do that, and the only way really, is through carbon fee and dividend. I just don't see any way around that. And so I think it has to be part of our any legislative strategy, overall strategy. Now, it's not enough by itself, but I think this is the way I feel, that the right strategy for this group would be to focus on carbon fee, coordinate with Citizen Climate Lobby, and at the same time, start looking at legislative measures that would be complementary to carbon fee and dividend, and that would not be redundant of it or actually counterproductive. And certain, so if we begin by talking about carbon fee and dividend as the best, fastest way to reduce emissions over the next 10 years, say 20 years, and there's a bill, there are several bills in Congress already that have been promoted by, Citizen Climate Lobby has been promoting HR 763 for quite some time. So the groundwork has already been laid there in terms of preparing. And if we then as a group say, okay, that carbon fee and dividend has got to be part of this,
William,
it's got to be a centerpiece, because it's the most effective way to lower emissions.
William,
but then we look at the other.
Thank you for that input.
Well, wait a minute, I'm not done, Todd.
Well,
I'm not done.
That was your 2 minutes. First, I got to tell you, we have a whole team on the carbon bill. We have a whole set of questions that we're answering. We have a whole process for discussing it. And it's going to be, that is going to be part of our conversation going forward. We have several CCL members in our group, and we are very hot to trot with all of that. And so it's definitely going to be in the mix. We're just trying to figure out how.
Todd, I'm not promoting carbon fee and dividend. What I'm saying is, what is our overall strategy? That's what you asked for. What should we be doing as a group? If we keep going on and on and on, and we're talking about nuclear and this and that, it'll be so diffuse. You won't accomplish anything. And in fact, it'll be counterproductive.
All right. Well, today we're not talking so much about our group organizing as we're talking about the symposium a little bit. And Citizens Climate Lobby is coming to the symposium. The executive director was supposed to be there, but it seems like they're going to send somebody else instead.
But that doesn't address the question of the overall strategy of what this group is trying to accomplish.
All right, well, we'll come back to that. We meet every 2 weeks.
William, we have several other folks to hear from. Maybe they can
meet every 2 weeks for the next, 2 years, 3 years.
So let's hear from Curtis.
Yeah. What's going to happen, Todd? What's going to happen?
Well, let me insert one sec. On December 30th, we have scheduled a whole hour on the carbon fee concept, and we're going to discuss it in depth, just so people know. I think it's
I know that, and I'll be part of that.
Yeah.
I hope.
Okay, great.
Thank you for including me. I'm relatively new to this group. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
And I just was on the same wavelength as William, who just finished there. And I just want to speak to the social justice aspects of providing a dividend along with the tax that's rebated to every American. I included in the chat a URL that has an independent analysis from the Columbia Global Energy Institute that shows that a carbon dividend rebated to all Americans, as suggested by Citizens Climate Lobby. And Todd, you're going to go into this in the symposium, so I'm going to be quiet now.
Well,
but
yeah, we're actually not.
Just please include that in the person that presents this.
Well,
people need to understand that there's a very large progressive component. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And CCL will be there, and we're not going to be discussing, I said in the email to all the presenters, we're not here to discuss policy. We're trying to discuss how can we come together as citizens of the United States.
Perfect.
To save our planet.
And this idea of social justice is an important one. And this is one that shows that this is simple and it'll work. So that's my pitch. Thank you so much.
And come back on the 30th. We're going to hear all about this, and we're going to have an in-depth conversation about it. When that's the subject
I gotta go.
of the conversation.
Thank you.
What we try to do is to have subject matter conversations, so that's not always, the random and chaos. That's all I'm trying to do is organize the chaos.
Yeah, there you go.
And not make decisions myself or even among our group, because we're not going to be deciding what goes into a bill. But we decide which.
We are not. I agree. So,
all right,
Regina Cornwell.
How many more people on Stack?
Just one more that I know of, and that's Regina Cornwell.
Hi, Regina. Okay, welcome. We're all good because we're almost to 1:30.
I want to go back to, excuse me. Todd, I wanted to go back to your analogy of planting a tree versus the perennials.
It's the annuals. I made the mistake. It's annuals evidently. Yes.
Oh, and okay. But I have to question that analogy when it comes to the problem that we started having because of, the gridlock in the Senate, et cetera, when it comes to a president using his executive privilege to get things passed. It seems like that is a structural obstacle. If we're talking about structure and strategy, that's something that continues, even though it's gotten out of hand because our Senate isn't working very well. Okay, I wonder if you could just address that.
How the Senate say I'm sorry, the crux of the question to me, I didn't know I was going to get a question, so I was a little bit.
Okay, no, I'm just saying that I think that the analogy breaks down in a way of trees versus annuals. Or there is a tree that shouldn't be there, which is the executive ability to pass all kinds of acts and so on, because the Senate is not very
Oh,
functional.
right. I
Yeah.
see what you're saying. Well, no, there's no question about it. Executive action is the tool that we have that's most unobstructed. The only problem with is that it can be all reversed. So that's why it's a temporary fix as opposed to a more rooted permanent. Statutes, and where everybody right now, everyone I hear from in the movement is worrying about who's going to be appointed to be this secretary, because that could change everything, and who's going to get this job, and they're all in and then what executive orders are going to get passed. All of that is temporary, and all the movement is fighting the same sort of, changing fights all over again. And nobody's looking at the structural change on a longer term, which is legislation. And so that's all I care about, is passing legislation. And I know that everybody else will be in that game. And as a result, we're filling the void. And the Senate argument, I told the people, some of the Congress folks, staff, if you give us a comprehensive bill or an outline of comprehensive bill and you unleash the grassroots, then everything you can do in the Senate, the possibilities change. And if nothing else, millions of climate activists could drive Mitch McConnell, even though he's supposedly impervious to all of this, I don't think he would be impervious. We're going to get Annie Wilson on him. We're going to get all the CCL people on him. He won't be impervious, if we can get around something together, and we start going after the Senate. So that's why I say, we get hung up in the politics of it without thinking about the movement building that could change the politics. And in the meantime, of course, we have to do every executive action possible, and hopefully they will give us leadership. Right now, the plan for the executive action that's coming from the big green groups, I heard there's a memo, it's embargoed. Why is something like that a secret? So anyway, I'll stop with that because it's already getting late. It's 1:33 and we've had a lovely chat. I think I've learned a few things. I'm not good when things get emotional because my anxiety and my emotions, and I'm a fighter too, obviously. So I have to really be mindful of this for the symposium days. I'm also realizing that I need Beth. And so Beth, I don't know how much you're available for those 2 days, but I'm almost wondering if you could come and facilitate, and I would be sort of facilitated, but you would keep everything moving along.
Sure, I'd be happy to be your stack queen.
And sort of helping moderate even when I get too passionate or talk too much. I need you to cut me off. And
let's talk about that, Todd. But yeah, I think we could work something out. Someone wrote in chat as well, we need to get back to the original question. And by the way, what was it? And I think if I remember hearing you correctly, Todd, it was, let's look at the 5 questions that you put into chat a long time ago. Are we asking the right questions? Was that the original question?
That was the original question.
So we got some good feedback. Just to summarize, some people are very, very passionate about how we need to have the nuclear issue woven in, as Catherine said so well, in a non-confrontational, non-offensive way. I was kind of promoting the weaving in of international perspectives and how we're one country among many, and we need to be working promoting multilateralism, because the whole globe during this Trump era, has been suffering from a lack of multilateralism. I mean, Bolsonaro and just, all over. And of course, people are taking the lead from whoever's sitting in the White House. So thankfully that will shift soon. Who else wants to summarize what other arguments that we just heard? Because I don't, and someone asked to repeat the 5 questions. I know they're in the chat, but Todd, I don't know if you have them right in front of you.
It's sort of hard to copy and paste. If somebody else could go and do that, I think that would be great. And it's just, instead of a recap of what we've just said, if I could just twist this a little bit, if there are any closing thoughts on the questions posed, specifically on the questions posed, and any recommendations on how to navigate a conversation among these parties. I'm going to be trying to facilitate this conversation, and it's, my heart is racing right now. My heart doctor would not be happy about it. So I'm like getting anxious about it, frankly. So if any, and you don't have to tell me now, but you know, if you want to write me with thoughts or call, I don't know if I can do any more phone calls at this moment, but you know, if you have thoughts about how to navigate having these executive directors all in one, I mean, like 8 of them in 1 2-hour meeting. I mean, it's just going to be.
Don't fret, Todd. Lavana just solved that for us.
What'd she say?
Lavana just had a great comment. She said, yes, we're calling that role you're talking about a quote unquote climate chaplain role or process for moderating, which is kind of what I'm doing right now. We have some ideas coming out of the faith group. So maybe I'd be happy to chat with you and Lavana and whoever else would like to about that for next week. Because what we don't want, Todd, is to send your doctors into a tizzy because of your heart rates. And maybe we all do some heart math, heart brain coherence exercises as part of this or something like that. It's, you know, a totally scientifically based mechanism for keeping people focused.
Great. Okay, let's talk more about that. We have a meeting on Monday. I don't know if that's too late. Maybe we need to talk before. Somebody else, Diane raised their hand. Diane Stefani. I saw them. All right. So a couple last comments.
Todd, and
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
hey, Todd and Beth, I just wanted to volunteer if I can be of any help. I'm a retired human resources leader and have a lot of experience facilitating difficult conversations with good sized groups, especially of executives. So if that's helpful to you at all, I'd be happy to help with the planning or however I can assist.
Can you shoot me an email? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
Or put your email in chat, either one. That'd be great.
I'll do that.
All right. So, well, that's all good news. That's feeling better. My heart rate is calming a little bit. I'm a you know, a fighter too, and I love getting into it. But then my energy goes do, 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 and I got to bring it. Do, 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 do. Okay, is anyone else on Stack, or are we going to wrap up? It's past our regular time, but I don't want to cut anyone off who's waited this long to say something.
I saw Tara again wanted to say something. Is that right, Tara?
I'm really okay, except that I love the idea of having another moderator besides you. You're leading the conversation, Todd, but you need somebody else moderating and setting out really clear directions from the beginning that we are going to cut people off, and maybe some way that we are pre-setting, like, okay, if you want to have this other conversation in depth, because there's a giant technical conversation to be had about nuclear or about, you know, like there's other ones will keep showing up and we kind of need to steer them to something else. Okay. And then bring them back. But
yeah, I don't think we'll encounter that too much at this level. I think they're probably right now reading over the questions and a little bit nervous about even talking about what I asked them to talk about. I think the tendency will be to talk more about their groups, their individual campaigns. You know, that is the problem, because everyone can go to their websites and learn all about that. This conversation is not about promoting the individual groups, but I think these executives are, you know, they're at a very high level. So I hope they'll understand and appreciate that. So we'll see. And it'll be friendly, of course, I'm sure. I'm not worried too much. I don't mean to make everyone nervous myself about it. I'm sure it's going to be lovely.
It'll be fine.
Whew. Well, this was a good trial run, at least. Thank you to everyone who's been a part of this journey. We got a long way to go and we're just getting started, but we've already done beautiful things and uniting as a community here. Then we're already, you know, we're digging into it. We got our bill package. We got adopted district going. We have relationships growing all over the place. That's exponential because everyone's doing it themselves, which is really the, you know, proof of concept. And I'm just very grateful for everyone. And my last ask is if you could please promote the symposium. We want to make sure there's a big witness. We want the community to witness this conversation and then to know, and then we'll see where to go afterwards. And we'll have a debrief here as well. I haven't thought about that yet, but we will debrief after this somehow or another as a team here and get everybody's impact. I hope everyone's going to come. And if you could just please post about it or post the Facebook page, that would be very helpful. We were so busy doing this and it's such a late process. We didn't get started till after the election, you know, and that we haven't really focused as much on promotion. So any help there would be greatly appreciated. And with that, I think we're going to conclude today's meeting. There's no one else left. Just want to go to view. Hi, everybody. I just want to see everybody before you leave. Thank you all so much. We're in it. We set a big goal in motion to have this crazy level symposium, and I can't believe it has come together. I'm still waiting for them to pull out as they saw the questions. But frankly, it's so crowded now. If a few drop out because they don't like the questions, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Give us a little more room. So we'll see. Hopefully they'll stick with us. All right. Thank you.
To get to.
It's
a lot to get to. So we'll see how far we get, but they're ambitious questions, Todd. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. It's because of all of you that this is happening, because it's the support of this team and everyone showing up that just propels us forward. You know, it's the same thing. Rachel Matcliffe propels us forward. You all propel us forward. And I'm very grateful. And I don't have all the answers, but I am trying to help us organize ourselves so that we can fight together and then get the results that you all want. Thank you so much, Alberson, and we appreciate it. I appreciate the appreciation. I do feel it, and I appreciate that too. All right, bye everyone. Yay.
Thank you for your time.